Power stations have become all the rage over the last couple of years for a very good reason. I mean, you talk about emergency backup power for power outages, say during a big snowstorm or hurricane. Yeah, power just goes out. It's just inevitable. I grew up in South Carolina, and every year hurricanes come through, power goes out. It's just part of life. So you got to have some kind of backup power solution. But for camping, overlanding, all that kind of stuff, it's really good to have one of these little power stations, just because, you know, to keep your phone charged, keep you connected if that's what you need, or if you're a photographer or filmmaker or something, keep your batteries charged, all that kind of good stuff. And in more recent years, with LED lights becoming more common in filmmaking and photography, these power stations are starting to gain popularity among the filmmaking world as well, because you can power a lot of those lights off of these power stations. Now, generators are typically still more powerful than these power stations right here, because these are all battery power, but the inverters are starting to get bigger on these, so you can power more stuff. But they have other benefits over gas generators, like they're noiseless and they don't spit out nasty fumes, so you can keep them inside your house or on location, wherever. You can power these via solar power through solar panels, which is really awesome. And you don't have like maintenance to keep up with, like changing spark plugs and oil and all that kind of stuff. So with that out of the way, I'm going to talk about a couple of power stations that I have right here in front of me, and kind of how I use these for different applications, because they are all sized differently, so kind of use different use cases for all of them. But before I get into that, I want to go over at a very high level on power stations, just kind of how to figure out what power station that you need, because the biggest power station out there may not be the most practical for you, because they can be really heavy and you may not need to power a bunch of stuff. So it just depends. So a big question always with any power station is, hey, can I power this or that or whatever on this power station? And a really easy way to figure that out is to get one of these things. This thing is called a kilowatt meter. And what you do is you plug this into your wall, and then plug whatever device that you want to into that. And then what this thing is gonna do is it's gonna spit out a little reading and tell you how much power that device is actually drawing. So if you have multiple devices, you kind of get a reading on one, get a reading on the next one, and so on and so forth. You kind of add all that up to get an idea of how much power you're drawing. So say all your items together pulling up 600 watts. Well, getting a 300 watt power station like this one probably isn't going to suffice. So once you have all those readings, you figure out how many watts it's pulling up, then you can start to scale up and figure out what power station that you need, how big of a capacity that you need in inverter. So a lot of these power stations are advertised in watt hours. So like this one right here is 1,000 watt hour. Actually, it's more like 1,100 watt hours, and around 300 watt hours, and around 600 watt hours. So you get all those devices that you pulled up together. Say you just want to keep this easy, you have a total of 100 watts that you're going to be pulling at one time. Okay, so then you can kind of scale it and figure out which one. So this one is 300. So you have 100 watts and a 300 watt hour capacity. Well, in high level, divide that by 3 and you can get 3 hours of runtime. However, there are some things that you need to consider. It's not exact math like that, because when you're running off an inverter, that inverter is going to be pulling power, maybe 5 watts or something like that. And then there's efficiencies and all this kind of stuff, and you don't want to run this down below 20% for battery life. But that's the general idea. You have watt hours, that's the capacity, and then you have watts that you're pulling out, that you're drawing from this unit, so you kind of get a rough idea of the math there. Now the next thing you need to consider is the actual inverter size. So you can see each of these have little plugs right here. I'm in the US, so we have the US plugs, but each of these have little plugs right here, and these are from an AC inverter. And these all have different size inverters, and that's really important because you don't want to run something more than what the inverter can handle. So this is a 300 watt inverter in here. If you run something or run a bunch of stuff that's going to be pulling 600 watts, well, that can destroy this unit and it can maybe no longer work, and you have to get it repaired or whatever the case may be. So you need to be able to scale that and be able to understand exactly how many watts that you're pulling, not in just capacity, but in just in pure power to make sure that your inverter can handle it. All right, so that being said, I'm going to talk about these 3 units that I have right here. They're all different sizes, so we'll kind of go from like the largest down to the smallest and kind of how I use them for different use cases and stuff. So this big one right here, this is a 1,000 watt power station. I think it's actually technically like 1,100 watt hour capacity, but it's got a 1,000 watt inverter, and a lot of these power stations have a peak, like a surge rating on there. So this has a 2,000 watt surge. So if you turn on a coffee maker, for example, that's going to probably maybe spike to 12 or 1,500 watts, but then maybe go back down to 800 watts or something like that. So there's a lot of stuff involved, but use this little thing and you'll kind of get an idea of how those are pulling power and peaking and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, this is a 1,000 watt hour unit right here. And this is really good for powering LED lights because of how big the inverter is. You can run like 1 or 2 lights off of this, or even 3 depending on the light that you're using. Like an Aperture 300D Mark II, absolutely no problem. Paired with like a 300X, no problem. And it could probably even run the 600D as well, but you're not going to get as much runtime off of that. But you can also run solar power into it, run a solar panel into it. So if you're outside, you can keep charging this baby up while you are pulling power. But obviously it depends on how much solar input you have. That will determine how long you can run these things. So I'm not going to go over like how long you can run individual items on here, because so many things vary depending on the item, whatever the case may be, and just at the power station. So I'm just gonna give you use cases. So powering lights, all that kind of stuff. Heavier things, like you can run a coffee maker. So if the power goes out or something like that, and you have a electric kettle or something like that, or just a coffee maker in general, Keurig, you can run it off this thing, no problem. All right, sorry for the interruption, but I completely spaced on mentioning this when I was talking about this in the studio. But there is one really big issue with this unit, and it could and might be a deal breaker for a lot of people, which you may want to consider looking at something else specifically just for this one issue. Let me show you what I'm talking about. All right, so what you're looking at right now is kind of the front of the unit, and you have a screen right here, and it's probably really hard to see right now, sorry, but you'll have to take my word for it if you can't see this. All this is doing, this has got solar input, all this is telling me is it is getting juice, it's getting a charge, and it's charging the battery. But it's not actually telling me how much input, how many watts I'm pulling in from the solar panel. The other thing is, on the AC out, it's not actually telling me how much power I'm actually drawing from the unit. So if you're doing any of the math, you won't be able to understand or know how much time you have left on the unit. Now, on the contrary, this unit right here, the PU600, is a different story. So when I go in to plug in the solar input, what you can see here is it's pulling in 37 watts about, and this is not the optimal time of day. It's about 2 or 3 p.m. So it's this OKMO. Same people that make this unit right here, the bottom unit is the solar panel, and it's great. It's got a couple connections for all the different units and stuff, so it's really good. You can see this is pulling in, well, now 62 watts, and it's giving you a good indication of everything that you're pulling. And when you actually have the thing turned on and things are running out of it, you can see how much power is being drawn as well. Other than that, the OKMO unit works as advertised, but it's kind of hard to recommend it when it doesn't do that. But if that's not any of your concern, and you're very well aware of how much you're pulling, and you start a timer, then go for it. But even then, it's not really an affordable or cheap option compared to some of the competition. But yeah, that's all pretty much it. Back to the video. All right, so this one right here is a 600 watt hour unit with a 600 watt inverter in here. So what I typically like to use, this is kind of what I bring for camping, overlanding, all that kind of stuff, because it's so lightweight. It's got a really cool design too, but it's so lightweight. It's really easy to pack away, and 600 watts is the perfect amount for any weekend trip. And in fact, this one honestly probably would be enough for a lot of like weekend applications, but for longer trips where I'm gone for maybe a week at a time, I like having this little thing and just charge it over solar or whatever the case may be to kind of keep it topped off. But just the fact that it's so lightweight and so small, this is what I'll use to power when I'm camping. But also if I'm just if I have this on set along with this guy, if I'm around somewhere that doesn't have any AC power, or just have it just in case power goes out or whatever the case may be, I'll just run a camera into this thing, so I don't have to use up all my V mounts for that, so I can just kind of extend the battery life of whatever unit I'm running. So that's that one. And then this one right here, this is the thing to bring on set for everybody wanting to charge their cell phones and everything. Instead of tapping into the power that matters for keeping your devices running, then bring this little thing and tell everyone this is where you charge your cell phones. And that way you can put it in any corner of the room and people can charge their cell phones, no problem, charge their tablets, whatever the case may be. And that can be their little station, because we've all been there. You're setting up your lights, you're setting up your power strips and everything, and people just think, okay, I'm just gonna plug my phone in, take up a power strip, or unplug a light, or whatever the case may be. Super annoying. So bring this, put it in the corner, and say this is your cell phone charging station, and call it a day. So yeah, I try to go pretty briefly over these, simply because, I mean, they're pretty similar to a lot of the power stations out there with regards to kind of features. You have AC power and DC power, and you can power it via solar panels and whatever else, or via car charger. So they're pretty similar to a lot of the stations out there. So there's no real need to go into the specifics of each of these power stations, but more so talk about capacity, inverter size, and kind of scaling up and figuring out what you actually need for your application. And again, just get one of these guys. I promise you, I can't remember how much this thing was. I think it was like 15 or 20 bucks when I got it. And this has helped me so much over the years, just figuring out how much power I'm drawing from whatever unit that I want to power, so I can get an idea of what's safe to run through these different power stations, so that I don't trip a fuse or damage a unit or anything like that. So get a kilowatt, start adding up, start figuring out what your devices are running. If you get if you need to run a fridge or something like that, plug this in for a number of hours, like 8 or so hours, because the fridge will cycle. So you'll get an idea of kind of an average of how much this is pulling. So hope you found that helpful or useful or anything like that. If you did, maybe give it a thumbs up, all that kind of stuff. No, it's a little different than what I typically talk about on this channel, but you know what? These are very useful for us filmmakers and outdoor adventurers alike. So figured this would be a good video for everybody. And I like these things, and I'm a nerd. So if you're a nerd, hopefully you appreciate this as well. Anyways, folks, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. Peace.